Okay, welcome everybody to this week's video. For this video we'll be showing you how to change the origin to a random position in the part, and we're also going to show you how to work with configurations in SolidWorks in the assembly and also in the part environment. Now, we're going to change the position of the origin of the assembly. Now, when I imported this part into the assembly, the origin of the part is the same as the origin of the assembly. But in some cases it should be different. So let's get the CSWA exam sample in here. You can see that they specify the origin here on this green part. And they also specify the X, Y, and Z direction. Now the reason that they specify this is because the assembly calculates the center of mass and the coordinate of the center of mass from the origin. Meaning that if the origin from your assembly is incorrect, you will be getting 0 points for that specific CSWA exam question. So we're going to show you how to place the origin in another point, line, or face of the part you're dealing with. So let's move this back. So as you can see here, the origin of the part lies coincident with the origin of my assembly. So it's fixed into place in that specific location, and for 9 out of 10 times when you're working with the assembly, this is just fine. But let's say for the CSWA exam they want you to put the origin in another place. So let's remove the fixture, make it float again so we can move it around. And let's just say they want you to put the origin in this specific point. So we can do that by going to Mate, selecting this point, selecting the origin, and clicking on OK. Once we've done that, you can still rotate the part around, which is always what happens when mating with points. So what we're going to do now is we're going to make use of the extra planes. So we have the assembly planes, and what you will notice is the only point crossing all 3 planes is the actual origin. Meaning that if I would mate all 3 planes to the 3 planes of my main part, it would also be fully defined. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to select the front plane of my part and mate it to the front plane of my assembly. And once I've done that, if we go to the movement, we can only rotate the part now along the origin. And then we can select the right plane of both the assembly and the origin and make it parallel. And once we've done that, the part is fully defined again. But now as you can see, the origin of the assembly is here, where previously it was here in the origin of the part. Now it can also happen that SolidWorks wants you to change the X, Y, Z direction. You'll see that here in the lower left corner, you see X, Y, Z, and the Y here is exactly the same as this top arrow from the origin. And the X here is exactly the same as this arrow from the origin here. Now I can also specify that it wants the X and the Z axis changed. So in order to do that, we need to modify the mates we just made. So this mate should be 90 degrees, so perpendicular instead of parallel. And this mate should also be changed. So to do that, I'm going to delete the last mate. I'm going to edit, so right click, edit the other mate, make it perpendicular. So now it can only move, rotate in this direction. And then we're going to add another mate and make this parallel again. So now again it's fully defined, but on a different angle. So as you can see now, if I compare the origin of my part to the origin of my assembly, that they will differ. The y-axis of my part is now the z-axis upside down of my origin. So you can see here the z-axis upside down, and the y-axis of my part is pointed the other way around. The x-axis is still pointed in this direction, so that's still the same as the x-axis in my assembly. So if you want to change the axis systems, from the part to the origin, it requires you to fiddle around with mating all the main planes of your assembly in your main part. Okay, so this is one section of the part. Now we'll continue to creating multiple configurations and show you how configurations work in both the part and the assembly environment. Okay, so in this part of the video we're going to discuss configurations and how to work with configurations. We're going to show a couple of different ways of applying configurations. Now we use this folder here, so we're going to switch from the default layout to the configurations toolbar to add our configurations. And configurations are really handy to create multiple parts in a single part. So this is all one single part, but this part has several configurations. So one is just an L, one is an L with a hole inside, one is a T 30mm stick, one is a T 50mm stick. But this is all still one part. So you can use configurations, for instance, to create multiple cars. If you would draw an entire car in Solidworks, then one configuration of the car could be the Volkswagen Golf, another configuration could be the Volkswagen Polo, another configuration could be the Volkswagen Golf Plus. So you could have several cars in one assembly as a configuration. So all the separate car types, separate configurations, and all the parts can also have different configurations. So we're going to show you how to work with configurations in an assembly later on. But first let's start with the part environment. So if we want to make a new configuration, we right click, add configuration, we give it a name. For instance, now let's call this test. And then we can make changes to this part. So that's how you add a configuration. Now let's go back, let's remove it again. Now the second part, the L with a hole, only thing we did is we added a cut extrude. Now if you just create a cut extrude in this specific feature, you can go to edit feature, and then here at the bottom you could say for which configuration this cut extrude is valid. And in this case it's only for a specific configuration, namely the L with a hole. And then if I go to another configuration, for instance L, you see that the cut extrude is suppressed. So if I go to edit feature, see for this configuration, it's suppressed. And it's grayed out. Now, if we go to the T configuration, the thickness between the L configuration and the T configuration is the same. The L is also 30mm thick, but the T configuration has a specific dimension. So if we go to our sketch, this dimension controls whether the shape of the part becomes a T or an L. So if I change this to 0mm, my part will become an L. And if I change it back to 25, my part will become a T. Now if I change the dimension, you see an option here. I can specify for which configuration this should be valid. I can say, okay, make this 25mm for all configurations, then also my L configurations will become T's. Or I can specify configurations. I can select for which one this should be valid. In this case, I can select both of the lower configurations, and I can enter a value. So let's change this to, what do we do, 35. Exit this. Now, if we switch configuration to T50, this will also have changed the dimension to 35. And my L configuration is still the same. Now let's change it back, go back to the sketch again, change this dimension back to 25, specify which configuration, so select these two, click on OK, and exit sketch. Now the last thing I want to show you is how to change the thickness. So for this configuration we just change the thickness, and the thickness of course is specified in our bus extrude. So right click this, go to edit, change the thickness, and once again at the bottom we can specify for which specific configuration we want to change the thickness. Now let's make it 60mm, click on OK, and now it's 60. So if you go back to 30, 50, but this is now 60mm, so let's change the name by doing right click, properties, and make this 60mm, and click on OK. It's changed. And if you go back to the L, it's back to our original configuration. Okay, well how would this look like in an assembly? So let's open an assembly, we have the static assembly open here. If we were to enter the component in our assembly, and let's say we want to change the state in the assembly. So let's say we want to attach this part to the engine, which of course is ridiculous, but this is just an example. We can just click on the part, and here we see a little drop-down menu. And from this drop-down menu, we can select every single configuration, click on OK, and it will immediately switch. So you can always change configuration, even in assembly. Now, let's remove this part again. You can also change the cylinder head here. And we have multiple configurations for that. We can also go to our feature manager here, click on it. You can see we have another type of cylinder. So we've added some configurations in the parts as well. And we can also change the cylinder head, one with an inlet and an exhaust. And we can go back to the standard head as well. So this is how you can work with configurations in an assembly. Now what you can also do is you can also add some other configurations. For instance, we've added one where we added a cut in the assembly. So we're going to do that now. We also have a test assembly. This already has the cut added. So we've added this so you can look into the engine by activating this configuration. Now how do we add it? So we go to this with cut static assembly, and we have an assembly feature, and we can make an extruded cut, and we're going to do that from the top. So we're just going to create a contour, and oh, that's the wrong square. We want to corner rectangle because we just want to cut out 25%. So we don't have to add any dimensions. We can just add tangent relations to create the 25% cut extrude, like so. Then if we exit this, it automatically goes back to the cut extrude, and here at the bottom, within the feature scope, we can select which of the actual parts we want to cut through. So we can select components, but auto select is on by default. So let's deselect this, and we want to cut through the head, the cylinder walls, and the main engine compartment. And click on OK. Oh, I forgot to make this cut extrude through all. Okay. So now if I switch back to a configuration, as you can see, it is removed. And if I go back, the cut extrude is added again. Now, whether I'm in the part environment, the assembly environment, or if I want to create a 2D drawing, I can always select the configuration from each part. Okay, thank you for watching, and see you again in the next video.